Are you an overwhelmed SaaS founder ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Well, hey, champions, welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you missed last week, go back and check that out. I talked with Neil Gordon about crafting an elevator pitch that gives people chills in under 20 seconds. So if you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend you check it out. Be sure to download the free template from the show notes as well to create your own elevator pitch that gives people chills in under 20 seconds. Our current guest today is Jim Kane, CEO of RedChirp, which provides better business texting for highly regulated industries. He has an aviation background and still flies, in fact, a really cool Citation jet. Jim is a 4-time founder, 1 moderate success, 2 successful exits, plus his current venture, which is blown up and found an outstanding niche. Jim has found repeated success working with his sister Jenny on multiple ventures over the last 15 years. Jim, Jenny, and Jenny's husband are all co-founders at RedChirp. Today, Jim shares the good, the bad, and the ugly of lessons learned and success secrets along the way, and how to successfully transition from leading a mid-market company right back into startup mode without missing a beat. Today's episode is sponsored by Champion Leadership Group. Get free growth tools and map out a growth plan to scale your SaaS business beyond 10 million. Travel with fellow SaaS entrepreneurs on your growth journey using a proven methodology that is mentor-guided, results-focused, and peer-supported. Celebrate wins and quickly rebound from setbacks to achieve profitable growth, impact, and freedom. Unleash your SaaS growth at championleadership.com today. Well, hey, Jim, welcome to SaaS Fuel. How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's kick things off and start about, tell me a little bit about your journey and how did you end up where you are today at RedChirp?
Well, that's
quite
a big
the story.
Question. So, I've had a couple of businesses over the years. I had a software company called Intelligent Environments that I started, with my dad, kind of in college, right? So quite young. And we were making software for textbook publishers. So it was the kind of, software that goes along with a textbook. We did some for engineering, and we made a product called Calculus Machina. And if one of the 4 purchasers of Calculus Machina is out there, I'm terribly sorry there was no Calculus Machina 2, but it was modestly successful. It never really got anywhere. I've had an ownership interest in a aircraft maintenance shop and so forth, which wasn't really where I wanted to be long term. And I've been involved in a couple of software startups that have grown, to a pretty decent size. They're all very niched down, type initiatives. And right before the pandemic hit, I'd largely transitioned out of, the most recent of those 2 software businesses. We're planning to take a year off, and relax in between. And well, that kind of didn't happen. There was no travel in the world or whatever going on then.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to relax when all you can do is stay home, right?
Well, I mean, for the first week or 2, it's pretty relaxing. Yeah. Right around week 70, it gets a little monotonous. So somewhere in there, we decided we needed a pandemic project, and that's how RedChirp was born.
That's great. So tell me about, you said, really define niches with your software. What is the benefit of being, in a small niche versus being really broad and serving everybody?
Yeah. So, everybody has great ambitions, right? And so everybody wants to go into that meeting, particularly when you're exiting a business or coming up with an investment valuation, where they say, "What's your total addressable market?" And you say something like, "Everyone with fingers," right? The problem is there's really very few products that really serve those huge markets well, right? it's very hard to know, a broad market like that, right? When you niche down, which almost all startups have to do, unless you have venture backing in the 8-figure range, right? You're basically going after a niche, right? Whether you know it or not.
Right.
And the niche, you can know what it is, right? And you can understand those customers, and you have sort of a baked in answer to the question, why should they do business with you? Right. If you can say, hey, we serve telephone repairmen in Kansas, that's sort of an innate answer to when you're talking to a telephone repairman, why should I buy from your company? You say, well, that's all we serve.
Right.
So you at least have the beginning, right?
Yeah, they know that that's something that is for them if they're in that business. And then if they're out of that business and they do something completely different, they look at it and they go, this isn't for me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there's a reason to keep talking to you. There's an implicit promise that because you serve that one specific niche, you know it, right? And so that's kind of where you have to start outside of a few, very unusual cases. Even those unusual cases, by the way, if you go back and look at them closely, take like Uber, right? Celebrated, talked about a lot, enormous valuation, went public, all that great stuff. But initially, the market was people that needed a cab in, I believe, San Francisco. One market, right? It was very, very, it was niche down, right? It's hard to find somebody that serves everywhere. Facebook, same thing, was limited to college campuses for many years. So you got to start there.
I think that's what's really hard to remember as founders is these big companies, they started in one place. They started small. So they haven't always been the giants that they are today. And even, listening to interviews with those founders, you interview the founder of Uber, it's hard to remember back. What was it like at 5 million in revenue? What was it like at 0? What was it like at 10 or 20? And they may remember back to the early days, maybe that's 200 million in revenue. And so it's a little bit different in scale than what we think of.
Sure. You also have the way that they want to be remembered versus the way that it actually was.
Oh,
right?
How about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a story that has to get simplified for marketing purposes. Nobody wants to know the ins and the outs. Nobody except people that are trying to emulate the success, right?
Correct.
Right. So, when the marketeer comes along, there was that interview one day where, Zuckerberg, I'm sure, was asked, hey, tell me the story of Facebook by a marketing type. And he started going on about, this and that. And that person, I imagine that she said, yeah, let's just forget about all that. This is clearly for everybody.
Right.
This is what the story is going to be, right?
Right. Yeah, this grand vision from the dorm room for everyone.
Yeah. Or the classic, 10-year overnight success.
Right. And that's interesting. Yeah. Tell me about, your success journey and what has that been like? Has it been an instantaneous thing or has it taken a little bit of time?
Well, I mean, brain the size of a planet. I always meant instant success. Never had to think about it. So no, there's a movie there's a line from the movie Talladega Nights. I wake up in the morning, I piss excellence. Sadly, that does not apply here. Right. No, I mean, I did an entire business that failed miserably. Right. So intelligent environments, although we made, we did get a product out the door, which, hey, that's not nothing. 4 or 5 people purchased it, right? At $30. So we can safely conclude that was not a financial success, right?
And so what do you think the difference is in ventures like that are successful and those that maybe aren't as successful?
So it varies by stage, right? So there's a distinct life cycle to, a traditional, SaaS style business, right? They go through certain well-defined stages. So, right out of the gate, the product idea that you have, can you build a prototype? Can you build an MVP? Right? There's a lot of services that never clear that bar, right? You have this vision. Can you create something that at least approximates the essence of it, right? So, intelligent environments with Calculus Machina, we got something out that satisfied what we were trying to do, right? we never got anywhere past that point, right? As you enter the next phase, you have to find, an initial cohort of users, right?
Right.
So somebody that can use your MVP, right? Now they're going to be bleeding edge early adopters, right? But somebody has to use it. And we barely got there, right? So, we failed right out of the gate, right? Or pretty close to right out of the gate. And as you keep going down, you have to make a transition from your initial cohort, into the really the early adopter stage, right? People that are very forward thinking, very sympathetic, willing to put up with all kinds of limitations and bugs and so forth because they sort of share the vision. And as you journey through that, you're trying to approximate a product market fit, right? That's your target at that point. So, then you get to product market fit, and then you go after, the bulk of the early adopters, right? You transition into that early majority. So, so you're kind of chugging along. Somewhere in there, you have to answer the question, hey, can I economically reach people?
Right.
Right. So, the graveyards of SaaS business, the graveyard of SaaS businesses are filled with people that couldn't get a prototype out. So that's going to get most, right? Couldn't get an MVP. That's going to get more. Couldn't interest anybody, so couldn't get an initial cohort, right? And then couldn't bridge that gap into, hey, I have product market fit. If I show this to my target niche down audience, I don't get a good close rate, right? So that's going to take out, almost everybody, right?
That happens a lot.
Yeah, I'd say it's most, most investors that are not of the angel bent, they'll say that if you don't have $1 million in revenue, and there's usually some more caveats on that, $1 million in revenue and more than a certain amount of concentration, right? Then they'll say, I won't invest, right? There's a big divide. If you can get to that $1 million in revenue with no real customer concentration point, then you start to get to where you have decent chances of making it to an exit or building a sustainably good company, right? Then you're probably up to like 60% you're going to make it or so, would be like my uneducated guess, right? So when you get there, you're pretty good. Before then, that's where all the failure happens, or most of it does.
Yeah, it's definitely a really tough journey. So how do you know, what are the marks of when you know that you have that good product market fit?
So it's going to vary a lot. And one of the things that I think is important is that before you enter each of these phases, you define what success looks like, right? There's a story of two moonshiners, and they've just created their first batch of their concoction, right? And they're talking to each other about how they're going to price it. And one of them suggests they price it at $1 million a case. The other one says, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to buy it. The other guy says, well, shoot, it's only going to take one, right? So it depends on your market, right? So for some products, and they're going to be few and far between, product market fit might mean that 1% of the target market you show it to, buys it. You make 100 sales calls, you get one person to say, hey, I'll give this a go, right? That's rare, right? Most of the time, if you think ahead to unit economics, you're going to need something where you have a decent close rate off of, phone calls or face-to-face meetings, above 50%, 65%, sometimes 80%. And so before you go in, you have to think about your market and pick a benchmark for what product market fit is. And then once you pick it, you measure that and you see it. So for RedChirp, the benchmark that we picked was that after 3 phone calls, so in the modern era, Zoom meetings, right? We would have a 65% close rate or better for businesses that were in our niche. So each part of that definition becomes important. You have to track leads that you have that come in, people you talk to that are not in your niche, and then not count those against you. RedChirp targets businesses that want to do texting in highly regulated environment. We have customers that are auto dealers, right? But they don't count. It doesn't matter if we started closing them at 80%, they don't contribute. And then you have to measure, okay, 3 phone calls, 3 meetings, do they buy, do they not buy? And you're there when you clear your benchmark.
No, that makes sense. Well, tell me a little bit more about RedChirp. How did you come up with the idea? How did you end up in highly regulated environments? I mean, that's a really interesting place to be.
Yeah, well, we didn't start out that way, right? So contrary to my own advice, we started out wanting to make a product that was suitable for everybody with fingers, right?
I think we all start that way. I mean, it's just kind of that division of, I'm going to serve everybody. I love your analogy. You know, who's your customer? Everybody with fingers, right?
Yep. Yeah. Everybody with fingers.
Everybody who can text.
Some musicians set out with a target market, everybody that has ears, right? The better among us say that they're going to start out with their market being everyone with good taste. Right.
I like that.
You know, that's the very erudite way to say it, right? If you're not my customer.
Yeah. If you don't buy, then you're not fit. Not sophisticated enough to understand.
Yeah. There's some clothing brands that I think take that attitude.
Oh, there definitely are.
Yep. So, so, you know, and of course we're going to change the world, but no, because, my co-founders are my sister and her husband. We've been in business together before. You know, we started out, I think, a little bit, on time number 3, right? You know, we started out a little bit better, and we sort of started out very much saying like, well, we got to do something during the pandemic, right? So let's try to do something, right? You know, and we just kind of picked something. You know, we had done some interviews before the pandemic started. You know, we had a very kind of, thoughtful, or you might say, at least it sounded good when you say it fast, right? We had this process. Of course, we threw all that out the window, right? But we had this process where we're interviewing business owners and finding out pain points and all that. You know, that didn't stick. You know, we kind of saw that, hey, there's a pandemic on, people are doing things at a distance. And we thought, since you're not stopping into stores, we thought, well, you might want to do some texting with businesses, right? We noticed that businesses didn't have, by and large, a really good way to do that. And they still don't. And so we started out saying, hey, let's make a product that lets you text and video chat with a business from their website, right? And we had a kind of an organic journey from there. We knew we had to find a niche. And very early on, we had a couple of car dealers that used RedChirp. And we thought, oh man, we found our niche, right? This is great. And we pretty quickly learned, hey, that's not a good niche, right? There's a lot of competition. Car dealers are part of these big ownership groups. They don't want to take chances on startups. There's entrenched technology players. It just wasn't a good fit, right? And so we had some initial success. We moved on from that niche. We just kind of noticed that, from our initial cohort of users, kind of random, people that we knew or had bumped into or talked to us at random that signed up for RedChirp or agreed to try it out. We noticed that the folks that were subject to a lot of regulation, there were a lot of products they couldn't use, right? There's a lot of products you can use to text or video chat or whatever you want to do. Sure. If you're a store that sells scented candles, right? If you're a healthcare company, you're much more limited. And, because of our prior business ventures, we have a background in compliance, right? The aviation industry, pretty heavy on compliance, as you can imagine.
That's a good thing.
But, it keeps the airplanes up there, right? Yeah, I had a guy from the FAA once told me that in many respects, aviation had a perfect safety record because we haven't left anybody up there yet. Right. Yeah. But
takeoff should always equal landings, right?
Or at least approximately.
Right.
Yeah. But, so we have that background in compliance, so it kind of fit for us, and it gave us that answer to the question, why should we talk to you? Right. You say, well, we specialize in compliant businesses, and you've got an answer, and away you go.
Oh, that's really smart. So how is it working with family in business? I know, that can be a challenge sometimes. How have you navigated that?
I would say that on that, we've just gotten very lucky, right? I've seen a lot of businesses that have family founders really struggle, right? The family dynamic that we have has made that easygoing. A lot of that's just luck of the draw, So I don't have any advice for how to make that work, for anybody else. My sister and I are super close with our parents. So we always had this kind of pressure upon us, that we couldn't get in too big a fight because we couldn't let mom and dad down. Right. So, maybe that helps. If you are blessed to have a relationship with your family members, that's conducive to co-founding a business, right? Which is both temperament and skill set and availability of time and all that. It is really wonderful because you have somebody that's always at your back, right? and you're not going to, your sister's not going to clean out the bank account and then have an Instagram that's coming from Argentina, right? She's in it for the long haul, right? And so it is really nice, but a lot of people don't have that dynamic. And if you don't, I don't know how to get you there. So
no, that makes sense. I think all those are really good factors to look at, and just background and skill, and having that right matchup, regardless of whether they're family or not. Would they be a good business partner? Would they be a complementary business partner to you? And I think a lot of people don't really look at it that way. They just look at it as, family. Yeah, why not? But there are lots of reasons why not.
Yep. And then once you, one of the, this startup journey and SaaS journey is a difficult one. One of the things, that makes it challenging is that, that a good percentage of time, you're not going to succeed. Right. One of the nice things about it is there's no rule that says you can't try again. So
that's great.
When you find a good team, though, you need to stick with it. Right. You have to think about who your team is. If you go back and look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs, you will see the same names coming up over and over and over again in each of their ventures. And so a lot of what they have is a really good team. And you look no further than, the PayPal Mafia or, Ari Trevanian. Every Steve Jobs business, you've got Ari in it somewhere.
Right.
You have some of the investors are the same. Right. So, when you do find that team you partner with, just hang on to that for dear life. Right.
That's really good. Have you done that with multiple companies, brought the same team outside of family, but other team members, more ancillary team members? Have you brought them along as well? Or has it been building new teams each time?
Well, I mean, no, it's, it's the same people, right? It's always, Jenny and I were kind of the core that made, right. Which was our appliance SaaS business. I tried going my own with Digital Panda, a special digital marketing company. It didn't work too great till I got Jenny involved. Right. So no, I mean, the core players, the same, right. Frontline employees, managers, you don't want to poach those one business to another, but founders and investors, I'd say it's good to be serial, keep the same group over and over again.
That makes a lot of sense. And because you know each other, you work well, you enjoy what you do, and being able to move to the next thing together is always fun.
Yep. Yeah. It's fun. We're one sibling short, right? So I'm sort of the technical strategy guy. My sister Jenny, she's our operations person. We need another sister that's the marketing and sales genius. If we had that, man, we'd be.
Is it too late to adopt?
It's getting up there.
Well, tell me a little.
If anybody listening to this would like to,
yes, there you go.
If you can sell ice cream to Eskimos, then.
So tell me a little bit more about your background in the businesses. So we've heard RedChirp, we've heard about Digital Panda, we've heard about the appliance. I can't remember the name of that one you just mentioned. Tell me a little bit about some of those.
Neither can anybody else, so don't worry about it. Yeah. So when it comes to software, I'll even go further back. So we had this aviation maintenance shop, Potsdam Aviation Maintenance. So to the 25 customers that we had, you guys go, right? Turning to software. So we had Intelligent Environments, which made software that went with textbooks, right? Never really, got off the ground with that. After that, we had a business that did, digital marketing for major appliance retailers, right? That was kind of our first, substantial success, right? So we grew that, from zero, up to about 100 employees, a little more than that. We served I think it was like 2,500 or 3,000, appliance dealers across the United States, which, to toot my own horn, the market is about 5,000. So that's pretty decent market penetration, right? So there we were niched down. We had a list of every customer that fit our market. We knew 100% of the market. After that, we did sort of a closely related business, right? We built this digital marketing business, Digital Panda, that was designed for, these kind of channel marketing situations. You have a manufacturer that wants to sponsor digital marketing, but their products only sold through independent retailers, right? So it was very much an opportunity that we were introduced to, through our work with appliance retailers, right? So the classic example there is, you're Whirlpool, you want to advertise your new washing machines, but there's not a big retail presence. It's in every state where Whirlpool is selling their product, right? So you need a digital advertising product that lets them, compose campaigns at the brand level, and then have the conversion goal be getting people to come into stores, right? Yeah, I can see the excitement. It was better than watching paint dry, but not by much, sadly. It's a very focused niche, but I think we did pretty well by it.
Yeah. Well, some of the most profitable businesses are not, just by definition, super exciting. I mean, so you can do really, really well in something that may seem simple or mundane. It's a real need in the marketplace. You provide a great solution.
And, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sexier, more attractive businesses, the more competition you're going to have. So
that's true.
Go in the other direction.
I remember meeting somebody a number of years ago, and $1 million vehicle, and just what do you do? And he said, "Well, I own a company that makes boxes." You do what? and it was just one of those aha moments of, some businesses do really, really well, and they're just not something that there's not a whole lot of competition. I don't know anybody that grows up and goes, "Hey, I'm going to own a box factory." But it's just one of those things. It can be, it's a very specific niche. It is something that is highly profitable. It's something that really fills a need, especially as e-commerce continued to grow. And so it just made a whole lot of sense in looking at those things.
Yeah, I met this fellow that made a fortune selling men's clothing to salesmen at car dealerships. So he developed this whole shtick. He would have this broken down car, and in the trunk he would rig up this thing, to show off the wares, the ties and the tie tacks and everything. And it was, it would be this car that was, one breath away from falling apart, right? And he had it all mapped out, the times he would go, right, to the dealerships when they were slow. And he would go in, and he ultimately had a fleet of cars doing this. Right. he made, as he described, quite a fortune off of it. And I don't think anybody would call that exciting, but it worked, right?
Yeah. It's just a business that works. It's amazing the things that people come up with and grow into thriving businesses.
Oh yeah.
So how do you come up with your ideas? Where have those come from, over time, as you've continued to iterate and move forward and start new things?
I've always looked at an idea that is compatible with a megatrend, right? It's the way I've heard it described is if you can stand by a raging river, you can't help but get wet. Right.
That's smart.
So, so if you think about it, taking a look at retailer web services, right? The megatrend at the time was that every local business was eventually going to have a web presence. Right. And every retail business was going to have a web presence where they could sell their product, e-commerce web presence. Right. And so that was kind of a 0 to 1 transition. And so we knew that directionally it was right. So then if you pick a small niche of that, say appliance stores, right? And you can look around, you say, well, okay, there's 6,000 of these or 5,500 of these, right? How many have good e-commerce websites? 6. You're like, okay,
I'm surprised that 6 did.
No, they did. And they were doing really well. There was a company, AJ Madison, that grew from a startup to, a couple $100 million in revenue a year, quickly. And that was their whole thing was, they had a website, right? Yep. If you go to most websites today for businesses, particularly small and medium businesses, you will find their phone number on there, right? And one of their conversion goals is call us on the phone.
Right. Do people still do that?
Yeah, people do. And you'd be surprised the number of businesses that you cannot shoot a text to, right? And then if you take that up a notch to where you can easily get connected with various individual employees in the business over text, it's pretty rare, right? It's not unheard of. Uber does it, Airbnb, they have platforms that enable you to communicate via text with the people you're giving you your ride or whatever, right? But think about like your coffee shop on the corner, right? If there's a barista there that you like, can you text her and say, "Hey, are you there on Tuesday?" And the answer is almost certainly no.
No, that's creepy.
Right. But yeah, well,
No,
yeah,
I'm kidding.
or a car dealership and
Sure.
a sales guy is there.
That's a great
or,
use case.
Yeah, or zeroing in on RedChirp, right?
Right.
Your father is being cared for at home. He's in a home care scenario, right? And you hear that his current caregiver is on vacation, his regular caregiver is on vacation, and a new person is going to be giving care for him, right? Can you text that person to let them know something?
Right.
And the answer is typically no. If you want to do that, you're going to be playing phone tag for a while. You're going to call into a switchboard. They're not going to know what to do. They're going to maybe give you a number. They're going to pass a message. That person's going to call you back.
Right.
And you should be able to. And, in 25 years, you will. Every business will have every employee, that is frontline accessible to the right people via text, right? And so the RedChirp's sort of the same, directionally correct, uninspired. This is not like radical, craziness, right? Technologically feasible. We're not talking about teleportation,
but it solves a need, and really solves the problem, and it speeds up time. And I think that's one of the most important resources that we have. And when we can do that and remove friction, speed up time for clients, for interactions, that benefits everybody.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt that it's better. There's a lot of there's a really present barrier there. I think as business people, we tend to be a little more out there. We're more comfortable reaching out to somebody we don't know via phone, right? You have to put yourself into the mindset of a consumer, maybe even a reluctant consumer, right? If you're in wine country on vacation and you've never really been to a winery, let's say, right? It's your first time. If you have 20 options to go to, but one of them you can just text and make an appointment,
right?
A lot of people are just going to go for that. It's low risk, you're not putting yourself out there.
Well, that's definitely the easy way, because they don't want to be asked questions they don't know the answers to. They don't really know what to expect, and just having that process where they're kind of guided through makes it really, really easy to move in and engage.
Yeah, it's easy. It's asynchronous. If you don't like what you're hearing, you can just
disappear.
Yeah, look no further than your personal life. When I was a young man, you wanted to ask a young lady out, you had to call her home, her landline. It's
kind of intimidating.
Yeah, is Mary there?
Yeah.
Right. And that gave way to cell phones, but texting's way better. Right. It's the same deal with sales, right? It's much better. You have a question or whatever, you just shoot somebody a text. It's better.
And I think the real difference is you're looking at that through the eyes of the consumer, not through the eyes of the business. And really, what is going to make that experience great for them? Not, what can we do with our cool technology, or what do we think the market needs? But it's really putting yourselves in their position, and what would make things great for them.
Yeah, one thing that you might remark on later in this conversation is, although we are in the software business, technology business, so far we have not talked about anything technology related. What is down to the human need that people have and how they feel about it, right?
It's 100% correct. It really is. It's the people business. It's solving problems with people. We use technology to do that, but ultimately it is about the real problems that real normal people are having every day.
Yep. Yeah. And, and every sale that you make is going to be on an emotional basis, or the vast majority will be. And so if you think about, your product or what you're doing in those terms, I think you'll overall be much more successful.
So how does that work in a B2B environment? I completely agree with you that it is an emotional decision, but if you're selling to a company, how do emotions play into that decision?
The decision is almost always emotional, right? I now there's some listener out there that's selling asphalt, right? And for you, I can say, no, it's a commodity. And it's, if you're 1 cent cheaper and can deliver on time, you're going to get the business, right? But, most of our business decisions are very emotional, right? Because, we all have lived frantic lives, right? And we feel that they're overly full. And we bring that with us into work. And so you come into work and you have a job to get done. You want to get your job done. You want to get home to your family. That's your typical mindset. Most people, kind of approach their life that way, right? And so we place upon ourselves this veneer of rationality, right? Everybody thinks I make all my decisions completely rationally, right?
We like to think that.
Oh yeah, we do. And if we did, I think Google overall would be much more successful because all of their products today tend to really appeal to that rational user.
Right.
Google Drive is 16% cheaper than Dropbox. And nobody uses it. Right. I'm sorry to the Google Drive engineer that's out there. I know you have millions of users, but it's not Dropbox, right? And so, beneath that facade, we're thinking about how we're going to get the job we have to get done, done and get home, right? We're thinking about, hey, when something goes wrong, how much of a record am I going to have? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be able to say, hey, I did everything right when somebody's looking at this, right? How does it feel? Is it going to work? Am I comfortable with this, right? Am I going to look bad in front of my coworkers, right? And so those kind of emotions are always present there.
100% right. Well, looking back over your career, you've done some amazing things, and looking back, what are some lessons that you've learned along the way that you'd love to go back and tell your early career self, or maybe somebody who's starting out today? What would some of those be?
Well, there's a couple. I have a joke that popped to mind, but I'm going to refrain from making it.
Oh, you can make it. We can always edit.
All right. You ready? So what I would tell my younger self is, don't do drugs. Become a rock star, and they'll just give them to you for free. Sadly, none of that's true. But all right. So key things to focus on, right? So when I was in college, there was a professional cycling coach that came and talked to us, right? And he was talking about what it's like to coach cyclists. And, there's that at the time, like, hey, you're just pedaling the bike. Like, what do you coach somebody on? Just pedal harder, right? You'll go faster. Somebody asked him, this question, like, hey, like, what separates a high level amateur cyclist from a professional, right? And he said that, this was what stuck with me. He said that the thing that separated it was their ability to do less, right? And so that high level amateur would take on any amount of additional training, any amount of additional work that the coach foisted on them. If he said, ride 200 miles a day, they would try, right? The professional, though, when the coach said, hey, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tomorrow, go for a walk in the morning to loosen yourself up. And I want you to take a 3-hour nap in the afternoon. I want you to go easy, right? The coach would stop by and that person would be painting their garage or something, right? They wouldn't do less. So the most insightful pieces of advice that I've had have always been about doing less, right? In and throughout the career I had in RWS, I was always going to conferences, reading books. And it was always, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do net promoter score survey. I got to do this thing. I got to do that thing, right? Never enough time in the day. It just made me feel bad, right? Okay, so let's talk about doing less, right? If you want to pare down what you're doing so you can do a better job, in order to do that, you have to be able to answer the following question. For the stage that I'm at right now, what is the most important thing, right? And every stage of a SaaS business, up through the stages I've experienced, right? It might change when you're Google or something, but when you're starting out, you have one overriding objective, right? If you're trying to get your prototype out or get your MVP out, that's what it's about. MVP, right? If it doesn't pertain to that, don't work on it, right? Know what your goal is in the stage you're in now. Don't work on stuff that's not in the stage, right? So if you're building that super prototype you're gonna show to your initial cohort, right? Don't waste time having long conversations about the size of the total addressable market, right? That is 3 buckets down the road or 4 buckets down the road. So you want to always know what you're doing right now, right? You want to have a predefined moment where you will know that you've entered the next phase, right? So you want to be able to say, I am in this phase, and this phase will end when I X, right? And that ending part has to be written down.
That's really important.
Right.
Otherwise, we forget what it was, or we try and fudge it. Either we made it or we didn't make it.
That's right. That's right. It's also, earlier we were talking about cohesiveness among founders, right? This is a great way to create cohesiveness, right? And no slight meant to those wonderful business owners out there that sell the ropes courses and all that, right? You have a place. But having written down, you just get everybody around and you say, hey guys, what we're going to do today is we're going to write down where we're trying to get to. Does anybody know where we're trying to get to? And you write it down, you pare it down to one, you get everybody to say, I agree to this, right? Now take a lesson from your local car dealership. Have everybody sign it, right? Creates this bond to it, right? And then you say, okay, guys, how are we going to know when we get there? And everybody's going to say, well, that's obvious. We'll know it. You're like, great, it's obvious.
Right.
Tell me, I'll write it down.
Everybody writes it down, and it's all different because it's so obvious.
It's usually very tough, right? But you get that written down. And one of the things that's really nice about that is that, when your founder comes in and you're trying to build your MVP, and he's talking about, oh man, there's this company up for sale and they might want to buy us, or our total addressable market is this. You can say, hey, remember this piece of paper here? On it are written the things we're working on. I didn't see that on the list, right? But you can also end some arguments. You can say, okay, listen, let's frame this up. Is now the time to change what's on this page? Did we make a mistake? Do we have to go back? Right? Or look, is this just a distraction? And we can talk about it, for 5 minutes, get it out of our system and move on. Right? So those kind of things are very important, to think about the things that end conversations. Right?
So tell me about that. We talked about that a little bit earlier in another conversation about conversation enders. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So, picture in your mind that early stage startup, right? What we want is to have a bunch of people in a room with their little headphones on, hopefully a trendy space, some brick walls, kind of like a WeWork, but whatever the correct replacement for that is now, right? Patiently working away, fanatically building their product, right? So that's the vision. That's probably what should happen. The reality is a bunch of founders talking to each other all the time. Sometimes while drinking alcohol, right? That just doesn't feel right. We would all, if I said going into it, hey, listen guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build the next Facebook. So what we're going to do is spend about 80% of our time talking to each other about it. I think most people would say, oh, it doesn't sound like a formula for success. And those people would be right. So conversations are going to start. You have to have a way to end them, right? Efficiently without hurting somebody's feelings, right? And so the best way to do that is to lay a foundation, right? If you define what's important and what's not, right? And you define how when you're going to get to the spot where you can change it, right? You change what's important to the next phase, right? You have a good way to end a lot of conversations, right? And you can extend that over time. If a conversation starts and you've previously ended it, you can say hey, that's cool and it's fun to talk about. Maybe on Saturday we'll have a beer, we'll chat about that or whatever, but if you have this nice way of ending the conversations and you get this agreement in your core group that you're not going to go down these rabbit holes, it will save you a tremendous amount of time, leave you a lot of energy to work on, what is most important, right now.
That makes a lot of sense. So what would an example of one of those rabbit holes be?
Total addressable market. Creating a sustainable moat, right? You don't get to moat phase until phase 8.
Right. That's way down the line.
Yeah, it's way down, right? Networking effects, right? Endless conversations about this great networking effect when you don't have an MVP, right? I think most networking effects happen accidentally in reverse. We saw
absolutely.
It's going to be a networking effect, right? And so those are all things talk about things that drive business valuation, right? If you're not preparing to go to market, which is probably your last phase, right? There's no point in talking about that. You're not there. There's 8 pivots between here and there, right? Earlier on, more people are early on than are late, right? talking about unit economics before you have product market fit.
That's a big one.
Right. Yep. A lot of arguments start that way. Hey, John took a trip to California. He signed up our first cohort. He spent $10,000. We are never going to make it if it costs $10,000 per customer. Why the heck did he do that? It's like, well, because at the moment, unit economics don't count. Right. So as long as the Amex has room for it, we're going to go try it, and we're not going to talk about it again. Right.
I think that's important, is really understanding what metrics are important now, what are we working on, what the right next step is, versus things that may happen 5, 6, 10, 20 steps down the road.
Yep, but beware of metrics, right? So metrics are great, sound cool, they impress your friends, your investors want to know about them, right? Awesome. However, they're devilishly, fiendishly difficult because the founders working in a business are very emotional, right? And so the way you define your metrics, super, super, super important, right? I'll give you a good example that we got wrong in the early days of RedChirp,
Sure.
right? So we had a metric, monthly recurring revenue, and we defined it like this. We said, okay, so monthly recurring revenue is easy. It's what our customers have committed to pay monthly. Okay. A lot of companies do this. They slam dunk it. They even write it down if they're very sophisticated, right? And have taken my advice. To the 3 people out there that are going to take my advice, thank you. Right? So great. But that has all kinds of emotional drawbacks, right? Imagine that you sign an account and they're a very valuable account, right? Let's say they're going to be $50,000 a month. But what they want is they want 2 months of free trial, and then they're going to get going, right? So if it is January 15th, right, and they're going to try for 2 months, so then you got February and March, and then it's going to be like maybe March 15th before they give you the go signal, and you're only going to bill them on, say, April 1st, you're going to feel really terrible because that MRR metric, it didn't move.
Right.
Right. And, and everybody's going to say, that's crazy. I'd feel great about it. It's like, really? We didn't feel great about it. We made that mistake. Right. And so we switched to a different metric, which was AMRR, anticipated monthly recurring revenue. And so we defined some buckets. We said, okay, when somebody sends us paperwork, we're going to count that as 10%. So if their monthly recurring revenue that we anticipate is going to be $100 a month, we'll put $10 towards our AMRR metric. And then when they start their free trial, we're going to put it at $30, 30%, right? And then when they give us the go-ahead at the end of the free trial, we're going to put them at 70. And then when they actually start, we're going to put them at 100. And so what that does is it lets you have immediate response. When you make that big sale, the AMRR moves and you feel good about it. That detail in metrics is everything about how the metric motivates you, right? Or how it doesn't motivate you, right? A small change. Hey, we'll count somebody that gives us a verbal yes at 70%. Great. What that's going to incentivize is everybody going out and getting a bunch of soft yeses,
right,
that never move. You're going to hit your number, and then you're going to be crying later because you don't have any.
The revenue didn't ever come in.
That's right. Yeah.
Now that is really, really insightful in just thinking about, what is the emotional impact of the metrics. So it's not just the hard numbers, but what's really behind that, and the team seeing growth. So they're seeing some reward from their effort on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and the immediacy
Progress.
of that really matters. Yeah, nobody's patient. Nobody likes to wait.
No, of course not.
Right. Yeah, and then also critically important, writing down all the rules of the game on a metric, right? And that's going to serve you very well as you grow, because you're going to start out with founders doing all the sales, right? But sooner or later, you're going to hire these aliens, salespeople.
I love that description.
Right? Yeah, to founders, yes. Salespeople are going to be aliens, right? It's going to be very, your success with that sales team, in my experience, is going to be largely driven by how well you have defined the rules, right? Because professional salespeople tend to be rule optimizers, right? They're trying to maximize their commission. They're trying to figure out what sort of incentives you're gonna employ, right? How do they do well under the incentive plan that you have, all that kind of stuff. So if you don't have good rules and you haven't been testing them over time, you're gonna have loopholes. You're gonna be incentivizing activity you don't want. And good rules take time. They're like fine wine. You have to age them, right? And so the earlier that you start clearly defining your metrics and then writing down every little tiny exception and so on and so forth, right? The better your rules are going to be later on when you add team members.
No, that's really, really great advice.
It sounds good when you say it fast, right?
Yeah, doing it is the most important piece. So it's the value is in the action.
Yep. To say is to forget. To write is to remember.
Ah, that's good.
Yeah. Somebody said that, not me. But yeah, that's also true. So having stuff written down, it helps tremendously. It helps in your relationship with founders as well. So one of the things we did when we started RedChirp, we did write down, the geeky family members that we are, right? What are we trying to do? And so we actually have like a 3-page document. What are we trying to do with RedChirp, right? And it's that conversation is going to go similarly. Pizza, beer, founders. What are we trying to do? Get rich. And it's like, okay, really? Let's ask some questions about that. What does that mean?
Right.
Define it. What is the number? Okay, great. You get a number written down, right? Then you say, okay, the next question you ask is, all right, so if we are arms dealers trafficking into war zones, would that count? And then most people are like, all right, no. So you can quickly start writing more down.
Right.
The more you write this down, that's going to be a really good argument and conversation ender, later on, right? When somebody says, oh man, this other company, they took venture capital. Well, a lot of people's documents are going to say, well, we're not going to take outside venture capital, right? Unless the founders are pulling money off the table, we're not going to take outside money. A lot of people either will write that or should,
right?
Write that in. Most people are not, they'll picture themselves up for the ride on a swing for the fences venture-backed investment, but they're not really there. You'd be better off to say, look, if we're going to get $1 million, at least 900,000 has to be going out to the founders, right? That means when this company down the street that's losing money gets a $5 million Series A, and everybody's, why wasn't that us? You can say like, we wrote it down. It's in our founding documents. So that's why it wasn't us, right?
And that's really smart. And just really thinking about, what is that? What are the core values? What are the things that you are going to do or not going to do? And
and very personal too. We're going to serve customers within the United States. We are not going to travel more than 1 day on average per week, right? It's not rocket surgery. You really want to define like, I want my business ownership experience to look like this. We want mostly recurring revenue, or we don't care. We're chasing the highest revenue figure possible. How much revenue do you want to reinvest into the business? Do you want to pull a profit out? How are you going to decide? Are you going to pay down debt before you distribute profits, right? Like you can just write all that down and figure it out ahead of time. It really helps.
No, that's really good. You're really creating the rules, your own rules of the game before you start playing. And that happens over time as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, you can always change them. But the key test is when one of your founders or employees comes at you and says, I don't like this, we need to do this, right? Or they're upset about something that happened. You can really diffuse that situation by saying, okay, look, there's a couple possibilities here. Did we make a mistake when we made the rules? Right? And do we need to have a conversation where we go back through the rules and we edit them? Right? Or is this a unique circumstance? Are we just upset because fate didn't smile on us today? Right? Or are we upset about the choices that we made because we can't pick everything? Right? And that tends to suck a lot of the energy out and gets you moving in a productive direction, quickly when you can do that. If you don't have anything written down, you can't do that. The conversation will then just immediately pivot to, well, wait, no, you said the rule was this.
Right.
And away you go.
Or it's not something that everybody buys into. They haven't all agreed to it. And so it's something that is completely fluid. And so it's a discussion every single time this comes up.
Yeah. And that's why you also want to get somebody to sign it. Right. I heard a story once that prisoners of war were forced to write these confessions of all these atrocities they'd committed and that they didn't really believe in their initiative. And then they were forced to sign them. And even after they were liberated, they were made to do this under terrible duress, torture and all that. But even afterwards, they were reluctant to go back on what they had agreed to and what they had signed. Right. And so if it worked for prisoners of war, your founders,
Wow.
which are merely imprisoned by their capital and time contributions, right? It really helps create a lot of alignment, and also lets you sleep at night, right? You can say, I'm not going to worry about this because we thought about it, we made our choice, and we're going to live by it.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. I'll ask you one final question, and that is, lots of SaaS founders listening, what would be one thing that you would tell them, to do today to prepare for the next 2, 3, 5 years and where technology is going? What megatrends are we seeing now that we can be a part of?
Oh, megatrends that we are seeing now. Okay. I'm going to say some things now that are very unpopular.
All right.
Okay. We are entering a protracted period of labor shortage, right? You have continued economic growth, which of course compounds, that little 3%, it grows, it grows, it grows. The industrialized economies of the world, the English-speaking countries of the world, are either at or have tipped over the point of population decline, right? The average age of the population is getting older. These numbers are like gravity. And so we're seeing the leading edge of that today, right? But I believe that is going to be the biggest megatrend that is going to define the balance of our lives, right? And there's no quick reversal, right? And if you don't believe that, picture in your mind China for a moment, right? They had a one-child policy for a long time. If you don't believe that population is going to age and that they're going to have a problem where they have an inversion, they have more older and retired people than young workers and so forth, I don't know how to help you at that point. It's a 1 billion person country. You can't even have immigration that would satisfy that, right? So that's going to be the biggest megatrend, just all out, right? So if you can do something that helps in that direction, you're going to have the wind at your back, right? Getting labor out, helping recruit labor, that sort of thing, right? Stepping down from that, a less controversial megatrend, security and compliance, right? Back in the Wild West, there wasn't a lot of compliance. There weren't very many standards, and if you've seen the movie A Million Ways to Die in the West or something like that, that's how it was. That's largely how most software is today, right? There's a hodgepodge of highly compliant folks out there. Most firms are just shooting from the hip, right? As we grow to depend more and more on technology, which everybody is, right? People are going to want it safe, right? At one point, we didn't have the Food and Drug Administration. We didn't have the Pure Food Act, right? Before that point, people regularly were poisoned. They got, they had cough medicines that were, cocaine and whiskey, right? And people eventually said, hey, we've had enough. And this has to be regulated and stuff has to be safe, right? So whether it's the regulation or industry standard, compliance, security, and having a certain level of safety is coming. If you want to make somebody's dinner, you have to have a 3-basin sink. You have to wash your hands. You have to wear gloves. You got to have a hairnet. It's coming. If you want to make software, you're going to have unit tests. You're going to have security audits. You're going to have encryption at rest. You're going to have all these compliance-oriented things. So don't swim upstream, swim downstream. Anything that's going to take a non-compliant activity and help it be compliant is going to have, kind of the wind, at its back, right? So that's 2 big ones.
Those are huge.
Well, mega trend.
I think that's
right?
absolutely correct. I'm just looking at the population. You're 100% right. And that is true globally, and global populations are going down. And so, to be successful, those companies that are helping replace human labor with technology solutions or some sort of automation, there's real opportunities there, and just driving the labor cost out of the market, because labor is going to continue to be more expensive and harder to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a little pocket trend in there within the United States and other Western countries where we've had this abnormal allocation of workers towards, knowledge work, so-called white collar work, right? And what you're also going to see, and I think it's playing out now, is you're going to have there's this giant sucking sound, to quote Ross Perot, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've been over allocating to white collar at the expense of blue collar, trade jobs, that sort of thing. The wages in those fields have shot sky high,
Yes.
right? Yeah, a good question. Would you like to be a fully licensed, from just an earnings standpoint, fully licensed electrician, or a member of the bar, so a lawyer that doesn't have an Ivy League degree? What do you imagine? Who's going to have the best earnings over the next 20 years?
Absolutely,
right?
the electrician. That can't be outsourced. That's another thing, is it's something that will always be required. It's in demand. It's a really important skill. And you can never outsource that, to another company or overseas or remote. I mean, nobody is going to be doing, remote electrical work from somewhere.
Yeah. And now risk adjusted.
Yes.
Right. As a lawyer, there's a lot of risk. Am I going to meet the right clients early on that grow in to pay me a lot of money later on? Am I going to become a partner at a top tier firm, or is my firm going to get swallowed by somebody else? So many.
Am I going to have today $200,000 in student loans that I can't pay back because I don't have all of these other things falling into place? Or am I going to, get a trade skill and learn that and go and make money?
Yeah. Now put yourself in the mindset of that electrician, right? Risks. Will people need electricity?
I think that's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, precisely, right? And so the impact of that is just starting to get felt in the labor market, right? And so two ways to play it. Anything you can do now that's going to make, trade workers, blue collar workers more productive, you're going to have the wind at your back, right? Doubly so for white collar workers, because we have this sort of historical accident, this big surplus right now. But going forward, the mix is going to be different, right? And so you're just not going to have as many. And so they're going to need even more. Get yourself positioned, with that at your back in any respect. And you're going to have, downhill sledding, hopefully.
That is great advice.
Yeah. Hey, with blue collar workers, it's so intense. Your solution probably doesn't even have to work. Just, the barrier at the moment might be sounds good, right? So, you could be closer there.
That's great. Well, Jim, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Really appreciate you being on SaaS Fuel. How can people find out more about RedChirp, and where can we find you online?
So redchirp.com, red like the color, chirp like a bird. You can check it out. We do let you text us, so you could just go there and shoot us a text message, and we will respond. So that'd be the super easy way to try it out, right?
That's great, and we'll add RedChirp and your links in the show notes. So as always, everything will show up there that we talked about today. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate our conversation. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks again to Jim for coming on the show and sharing his insights and resources. You can learn more about Jim and check out his company at redchirp.com. And of course, follow him on all social media. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. As a reminder, if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/saasfuel. I will be sure to read these out on a future episode and give you credit for it. So keep those comments coming in. Tune in next week for our conversation with Andrew Amon, 3-time SaaS founder and CEO of 9 to 3, which is a startup studio that has launched over 50 client SaaS products and 14 of their own. So that episode is absolutely loaded with gold nuggets. So we'll see you there. And until we meet again next week, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/saasfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.